Assault Mode is a sub-mechanic that revolves around using a series of cards to tag out a lineup of synchro monsters into a stronger main deck counterpart of itself. A sort of inverse of Masked Heroes. However, it relies on a trap card and not a quick play spell. But that's not the worst of it. You can only summon the Assault Mode from deck. So if you draw it, you're just out of luck. Even though Assault Mode monsters float into their Synchro counterpart upon destruction, because of this massive drawback, more often than not, it just isn't worth the effort to play them. When I first came across Assault Mode cards, I hadn't seen 5Ds. I thought they were garbage based on something in the anime. Fast forward and I finally decide to watch 5Ds. Later into 5D's runtime, there are antagonists whose monster's main ability is absorbing synchros. Yusei and the gang are forced to come up with a strategy to counter this issue. The moment this was revealed, I thought to myself, this is where Assault Mode comes from. I can't wait to have a newfound appreciation for the... They just decide to synchro summon harder instead. Why do these exist? I can genuinely see these as a scrapped concept, since tagging out your synchro to dodge being absorbed seems like it would have had the same effect as Excel Synchro. But no, it can't even be that. I mean, Crow even used a non-Assault Mode card to the same effect. The original release date of them was while Season 1 was in the middle of airing the Dark Signer arc. While the gap between the end of Season 1 and start of 2 isn't big, I find it hard to believe this was something they were cooking all along, since it was originally only intended to be one season, and the second season wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders during its runtime. We have 7 different Assault Mode monsters. 3 are based on monsters from 5Ds, but for some reason the TG one was printed in the Vrains era of all times, and the other 4 are generic synchros of the 5Ds era. Of these 7, only one of them was considered worth playing. Good ol' Stardust. But even then, it still wasn't actually viable to play. So let's see what's going on under the hood and get to work. Crimson Crisis released on March 3rd of 2009 and debuted the initial wave of Assault Mode cards. Then a week later, the Duelist Pack Collection tin would give us Stardust Assault Mode. The signature card Assault Mode Activate tributes a Synchro and summons a corresponding Assault Mode from deck. Since it's called Assault Mode, they decided you have to summon an attack. Also, the archetype, if you can even call it that, is /Assault Mode, not just Assault Mode. I don't know why they felt the need to include the / because there's no Assault Mode card without it. God save us from RDA's /Assault Mode. Speaking of, our first Assault Mode and cover card of the set is RDA. RDA wipes the board when he attacks, which thematically is sick, but in actual gameplay isn't very impressive. I mean, I guess it's better than the original RDA, but who knows. It is a destruction effect, so this could be the sick new tech for Fire King and Yubel. In a world where you somehow summon a bunch of assault modes, this mass destruction effect is promising, proccing a ton of floating. Shame that isn't a realistic scenario. Arcanite Magician is a level 7 synchro that was functionally a synchro evolution of Breaker. Not sure if that's intended or not. Other than the assault mode, Arcanite also got a fusion upgrade. All of them have spell counter effects and weak stats. The assault mode version would be no different, but at least its effect is actually good. Removing 2 counters to destroy all cards your opponent controls is actually pretty insane, but this isn't a quick effect. On a card you will almost never summon during your turn. The fact it floats back into its synchro is meaningless as well, seeing as the effect to gain spell counters is only on synchro summon. The reliance on spell counters hinders its overall playability, but who knows. Maybe Endymion Assault Mode can be the future for this card. The issue with counters is probably the best indicator of another issue with the design philosophy of Assault Mode. It's functionally an engine for 7 different cards, and they have no cohesion. So, ideally, the Assault Mode engine would have to do so much drastically different stuff just to accommodate all of them separately. I know we both don't want to see a card that has 7 bullet points, listing an effect for each corresponding assault mode, even if we have ones as sick as Doomkaiser. Doomkaiser revives a zombie from your opponent's grave. The assault mode counterpart, on the other hand, This is just a zombie soul charge, being able to revive as many as possible from either grave. This card has insane potential with something like Zombie World. The only real problem is that Doomkaiser needs to be made with Plague Spreader specifically. While there are a lot of cards that are treated as Plague Spreader, they don't really make this playable. Or you could cheat it out with Spectral Sword's effect, but that's even less likely, unless you're playing Duel Links. Considering the fact that this card isn't once per turn, it's probably for the best this card isn't very summonable. Colossal Fighter is a classic synchro who can float into a warrior from grave, including himself, and gains attack for every warrior in grave. The Assault Mode version instead makes the opponent's monsters lose attack for every warrior in grave. But he also lets you Foolish Burial 2 warriors from your deck, which is a really enticing effect. Immediate setup for Vicious Astrolaud. You can send Fighting Flame Swordsman to send Flame Swordsman from the extra. You can send a variety of Noble Knight cards, Phantom Knights, Boom Mock if your opponent is on XCs, Mist, Malicious, and Celestial, all the heroes, Photon Jumper, the Amazoness Pendulums or Shaman, and Joker's Knight. The obvious concern is, a lot of these targets don't exactly belong in the same deck as this, but it's a matter of how much potential this effect has. Hyper Psychic Blaster, on the other hand, holds no potential. It does piercing damage and you gain life points equal to the damage you inflicted. It doesn't help that the PSCT isn't good on this one and convolutes that detail. The Assault Mode is just Neos Wiseman, but worse, which I don't know how that's possible. He's functionally just a big asshole that could hypothetically burn your opponent to death. I just don't see any legitimate utility in this card. To round off the original Assault Modes is Stardust, who is the most simple and effective one. He functions the same way as the original Stardust, but instead of a protection effect, it's an Omni Negate. In an era of the game where Omni Negations had a cost, this was an okay restriction. But sadly, times have changed, and you can just summon a card that's better than it with one card. The same can be said about its cost. If it blew itself up for cost instead, it could get back the original Stardust as well as come back during the end phase. Not to mention, Stardust could then protect from RDA Assault Mode's mandatory effect, destroying it so it floats into the original RDA, for even more damage. Stardust popping itself may have been way too insane for the time, but if it did that now, it'd just be a cute combo at best. The Assault Mode forms themselves aren't the only cards we need to look at. We have 3 spells and 2 traps. Assault Slash is just RDA's effect, but without needing to destroy something in battle. Just like with RDA, the destruction of even your own monsters synergizes with the floating of Assault Modes. So if you live in a perfect world where you manage to summon multiple Assault Modes, this could be the sickest board wipe of all time. And Assault Counter is just Stardust's effect, meaning it's at least good. Assault Overload is one of the worst cards I've ever seen. Tribute in Assault Mode for cheap burn damage. Tribute! They couldn't have even made this card destroy them so it would float. Assault Revival has you banish Activate from grave to revive an Assault Mode, and its effects are negated. Despite it not including it in the text and saying ignoring its summoning conditions, you still have to have summoned it properly first. I love this game's dumbass rules. This card is completely worthless. It also prevents you from tributing the revived monster. This is obviously in reference to Stardust, as it's featured in the artwork, because it could still resolve its negate after tributing itself for cost. I think the intended use of the card is to blow up an Assault Mode to get its Synchro counterpart back on field, which then lets you revive the Assault Mode you just blew up. It's also a quick play spell, so you could attack with the Assault Mode, blow it up, summon both it and its Synchro version back, and swing for a ton of damage. The only issue with this is, you need another properly summoned Assault Mode in the grave in order to be able to activate the card. Assault Teleport is a solid card. It puts back a brick and lets you draw 2. But it's more of an apology for the design and less of a genuinely good card. Aside from those, we have a collection of monsters designed to support Assault Mode. Arcane Apprentice is a tuner that searches Activate if it's used for a Synchro. Nightwing Sorceress allows you to activate Assault Mode immediately. Mercenary lets you recycle an Activate from grave or send one from hand back to the deck to pop an opponent's back row. Assault Beast lets you discard itself from hand to search activate. All of these monsters seem solid in a vacuum, but not a single one of them special summons themselves, or any of the other idiots for that matter. They all facilitate the trap, but none of them actually facilitate the damn synchro. Sorceress is straight up just a worse Aureus. Wait, hold on a second. Labyrinth Assault Mode? They even have their own synchro! 10 years after these initial cards, Dark Neostorm would provide us with 1 new Assault Mode and 4 new support cards. Let's start with the fittingly named Reboot. You tribute an Assault Mode and special a different one from deck in defense, ignoring its summoning conditions. Unfortunately, like most reboots, this misses the point of the original. It has to be in defense. So much for Assault Mode. Not only that, another tribute cost, not destruction. What's the point of making these cards float if you never want to pop them? It also lets you cycle back Assault Mode cards, but you're not exactly desperate to put them back in the deck anyways. Considering this was released during Master Rule 4, this support could have served as a great way to give Synchros a way to push out of the EMZ, so you could make another Synchro, but Konami wasn't willing to admit this Master Rule was a mistake. So instead, we've made another one in printing this card. Assault Mode 0, as in the amount of play this card will ever see. While it's now a quick play spell, it requires you have the correct brick in your hand. I assume the reason they chose to make it only in hand is to not invalidate the original, but it doesn't. It straight up goes above and beyond setting the original Assault Mode activate from deck, making it still worth playing and allowing you to activate it to summon another Assault Mode. You still don't want them in your hand, so this would have had to be one card in a long list of them that changes that fact. Unfortunately, it's the only one of the lineup that does, so it means precious little as is. You could search in Assault Mode to make use of this easier, but if you're searching for an Assault Mode just so this card can be live, you're already burning card value, which is likely the reason it feels the need to give you another activate. Shame they forgot the part where you'll have to be able to make another Synchro. Speaking of, the 2 new monsters in the lineup actually help Synchro summoning. It's a miracle. Assault Sentinel is a lone Fire Blossom for cards that mention Assault Mode. Sentinel also lets you make one of your monsters into the correct type or attribute for the summon of a Synchro. Unfortunately, it doesn't let you treat a monster as a listed material on the revealed Synchro, meaning no Doom Kaiser. Absolute cowards. Psi Reflector is the last piece of support, and it does everything. On summon, it searches for a card that mentions Assault Mode. Then you can reveal and activate in hand, revive a card that mentions Assault Mode in grave, and boost its level accordingly for a Synchro. The combo is summoning Psi Reflector, searching Beast, Beast discard to search activate, reveal activate, revive Beast, then Synchro summon. If you have Sentinel to start the combo, you can revive it instead for the material manipulation effect. There's still one problem though. Not a one of these idiots special summon. Still, how have we learned nothing? Psi Reflector is a level 1, so it can be summoned off of 1-for-1, a 1-of. It's also a Psychic, so it can be summoned off E-Tally. It's already bad enough that it entirely relies on unrelated, unsearchable cards. Considering there are people that want E-Tally banned, of which I am not, this engine is in desperate need of actual extension. There's so much card value being burned in this engine, I don't think you should even consider what Small World can do. Hinging their entire functionality on a single card resolving leaves it susceptible to... yeah. Also, Psi Reflector is the only card that can search cards that mention Assault Mode. The others only specify they can search Activate, so the only way to search for Zero, or any other card, is with Reflector. But you almost always have to be searching Beast in order to get it online. This is what happens when one card does everything, and all the other cards do absolutely nothing. Well, that's not true. It can't get Assault Teleport because it doesn't mention Activate in its text. This is why they printed Zero, isn't it? The Assault Mode cards work as a Synchro engine in other decks, but there aren't a whole lot of decks looking for it, especially when it requires your normal summon or drawing one of 3 unsearchable spells. You also only want to play 1 copy of Activate, and once you set it, the engine is dead for the rest of the game, so you still weren't even using Assault Mode as intended. Perhaps the new Assault Mode will elucidate that issue. TG Halberd Cannon. This is Antinomy's Ace Monster, to pair with RDA and Stardust. Cute. There's just one tiny issue. I missed the part where you're supposed to be able to excel Synchro in Master Roll 4. If you're making this asshole, you need 3 arrows for all of the Synchro materials. Or if you're being generous, 2, since you could link off and revive one of the Synchros. There is no universe where this is feasible. They did print the Link 3 a couple months beforehand, a card that has to summon 1 TG from deck, hand, and grave each, with no form of variation in where you get them from, not allowing you to get multiple from deck. So you had to make this Link 3 and somehow find a way to turn the 3 Stooges he summons into an Excel Synchro. This might not sound difficult with a card like Over Dragonar, but I don't know if you're aware. This card was printed last year. Who designed these fucking cards? Excel Synchro was already a tricky thing to pull off. So if anything, the Assault Mode cards only serve to get in the way of that strategy. The only upgrade the Assault Mode version offers is a banish of the negated monster and all special summon monsters your opponent controls. Big whoop. A banish isn't that huge, and the special summons banish isn't nearly as impactful as it sounds. Negates are almost always used at a specific choke point where your opponent doesn't have anything else on the field anyway. The intended idea for this card, if you live in a fantasy world, is to expend the Synchro's negate, Assault Mode activate, and have another negate. And if God loves you, you can blow it up and get back the Synchro for a 3rd negate. It wouldn't surprise me to find out these cards were designed 10 years ago and placed in a time capsule as they were too broken for the time. What a coincidence they decided to unearth them in a future where Synchro Summoning was dead. We're living in the bad timeline, huh? Well, now that we've seen what we have to work with, let's get to changing course to a brighter future. I think the first order of business is selecting more Synchro monsters to give assault modes. Obviously, throwing more garbage into the pile isn't gonna magically fix them, so there does have to be far better design philosophy in place. For starters, designing modern assault mode support to reset the trap and shuffle back the assault mode to the deck so they can actually be resummoned. Making original Synchro monsters specifically for assault mode would also be a good idea. Hopefully making a tuner Synchro that actually enables Excel Synchro summoning. This way we can give Quasar an assault mode, as well as facilitate the existing Halberd cannon and any other future Excel Synchro assault mode. There are almost 500 Synchro monsters in the game. Of them, here are some categories of Synchros that could use assault modes. Naturally, the remaining 5D's boss monsters, from the remaining Signer Dragons and their manga counterparts, to the several upgrades of Stardust and RDA. With that new Earthbound Nova card that can just cheat out Red Nova, it'd be cool to see the deck assault mode off both original RDA and Red Nova. Now that the Crimson Dragon exists, it could have an assault mode as well. There's plenty of room for anything from 5Ds. Nordic Gods, the Horned Horse Trio, Callan's 3 Dragons, Dark Synchros like Frozen Fitzgerald, Thought Ruler Archfiend, Goyo Guardian, Fortune Lady Every, Reptilian, Flat Top, Inti, and Kia. Naturally, there's space for Arc 5 stuff like Super Heavy, Speedroid, and the Clearwing line of cards. Hell, the Earthbound Synchros suck ass. Might as well assault mode them off. For comedy's sake, you could make ones for Nirvana High Paladin and Synchro Zark. I don't want to know how that'd work, but it'd be funny to see. While we're on funny candidates, Trident Dragion. And the Tenpai Synchros for that matter. I mean, you could use assault mode as a way to give the deck something to do other than turn skips going first. Outside of anime and manga directly, you could just support Synchro archetypes with assault mode. These are all decks that could get a unique boost out of this engine being improved. Although, a lot of them just need a boost in general. Giving them support around assault mode can be a unique way to support the deck. I just don't think it'd be the only type of support people would want for them. A Power Tool Dragon assault mode could also serve as a way to help Vylon. Finding these mini synergistic threads between these cards with assault mode support is ideal. If we're talking about cards outside of dedicated Synchro archetypes, you could make a Geomathmech Magma assault mode, so this art isn't wasted on a bad card. Speaking of wasting art on bad cards, Koi Belt. This guy pops a card. That's it. Could have synergy with assault mode and its floating effects, but it'd be nice to see him get a playable version in general. It'd be nice to see random generic synchros like Kui Belt that don't have a home find that home in Assault mode. There are two last subset of cards I think should be considered. The simplest one is the 3 existing non-effect synchro monsters. I mean, if anything, I think it'd be really fitting for them to get Assault modes that actually give them effects so they're actually worth playing. And the second being the pool of cards that require a named material for their summon. This includes stuff like Shooting Star Dragon and Red Nova Dragon, as well as stuff like Golgar. These synchros that require a specific name are typically not worth summoning nowadays, with most of them not even really being playable in their heyday. Assault mode cards based around that category of synchro can reinvigorate the playability of these cards. With all this brainstorming out of the way, let's move on to another facet the mechanic should utilize. Alright, let's get the obvious out of the way first. Print a link one. My first idea would be a link that requires a monster that mentions Assault mode activate. Ideally, it's something that makes the mechanic far more functional. Revealing a synchro from your extra to special summon a monster with the same type as the revealed card that mentions Assault mode activate in its text from your deck or graveyard, with the summoned card only being able to be used for synchro summons. Instead of cheating out in Assault mode with one card, it's more so to facilitate summoning the actual synchros with the Assault mode cards. Of course, provided there are more correlating support cards made for all the different synchros. Then I think it'd be best to add an effect attributed off for more value. This way it isn't just setting up link climbing, the most logical value being getting a spell or trap. That way there's a way to search them outside of Psi Reflector. The Graveyard Clause is more so to facilitate cards like the Stardust and RDA upgrades, so you can get the Assault modes of Stardust and any of the upgrades. Another idea for a link one is to use the Charles mentality. Link off an Assault mode and do any number of things with that. Maybe getting another Assault mode out with it being treated as properly summoned. This way, Revival is actually able to be used for something, which also encourages you to still make the synchro of the other Assault mode you cheated out. Alternatively, it could be a way to facilitate making the RDA and Stardust Evolution Assault modes. Linking off Stardust or RDA so you can set up the summon of their majestic counterparts, or their final evolutions. The only problem with the Link 1 approach is this idiot synchro locks you for the rest of the turn. Another approach to take would be designing generic synchros that are Assault modes. This way we can skip the dilemma of needing to set up like 3 or more Assault mode activates in one turn. I think a Crimson Dragon Assault mode would be the most obvious pick, but I think that'd have to be the mechanic's big payoff instead. Seeing as it's the Assault mode version of Crimson Dragon, it could be far more explosive. The vision I have is banishing 5 Assault modes from hand, field, or grave to summon it from the extra deck. Then instead of it floating into its normal version like the others, it summons all the synchros of the cards it banished, treating them all as being properly synchro summoned, and negating their effects for obvious balancing reasons. Then it can banish itself from grave to convert all of the synchros into their Assault mode counterparts. Obviously, it needs a caveat to prevent you from just making links with them. God forbid we make 5-headed Link Dragons summonable. This sets up a payoff to be playing more than just a couple Assault modes, and realistically is probably the only payoff you could have to justify running 5 or more of the worst bricks imaginable. The point is, there should be a hell of a payoff for playing it as a dedicated strategy, and I should hope that it isn't the only payoff for the mechanic as a whole. In terms of cards that actually help facilitate the engine to function, Inti and Kia could be good cards to prop up as the extract portion of this mechanic. I mean, they already have the floating going on. If you control one of the original synchros, you can summon the Assault mode of the opposite from the extra deck by popping it. Not relying on the trap saves us from needing to set it up multiple times. Setting the theme of their Assault modes to be based on eclipses is an apt fit for the summoning condition. Then they can float into the original synchro of the opposite card, as they're no longer eclipsing them. Then, if you don't control the opposite dragon on field, you can revive them from grave and banish them when they leave the field. You'd want to make Inti first, because its effect to get back Kia is in the next standby. But Kia's effect to revive Inti is instant, and not once per turn. Perhaps there could also be main deck Assault mode versions. That way, Inti's revival effect during the standby actually amounts to something. Unironically, make the extra deck Assault modes /Assault mode. Jokes are just the best form of foreshadowing. Of course, you could just call them something else, but this would be the funniest retroactive justification for including the / in all the effects. It could also serve as a way to keep cards like my theoretical Crimson Dragon from breaking game balance. These make it so you're encouraged to actually use the Inti and Kia synchro engines, though, like Sentinel, they lock you into synchros. So all of the Link 1 ideas would have to be void to facilitate these cards. Or of course, you could design Ascator and Supe Assault Mode, and that's where we get back into the main deck side of things. What I've settled on is that Assault Mode should have a core engine, and then different groups of sub-engines to cooperate with that main engine, basing them primarily around each different Synchro sub-mechanic, Excel, Delta Excel, Double Tuning, as well as the awkward Majestic Dragon Synchro engine. They can serve as support for the associated decks, and encourage actually using the Assault Modes as a buff to the deck strategy. Other than those sub-mechanics, there could be engines for other Synchro groups, having a card that facilitates the vanilla Synchros being made and sent off with Assault Mode activate, likely actually supporting their actual archetypes. I mean, scraps have a theme of popping themselves. Archfiend can finally fit in. The other subgroup would be the cards that have listed materials, not just for the Stardust and RDA cards, but for stuff like Golgar, the Malefic Synchro, Night's End Administrator. The fact that I didn't bother to look up Malefic Paradox what? I was originally going to make a joke about how I didn't bother to look up its name, and you can tell how relevant it is based on that, considering I bothered to look up Night End Sorcerer's name. But I guess the fact that it was in my head anyways tells you all you need to know about me then, huh? Deep Sea Repetiteur and Turbo Cannon. Almost every one of Yusei's Warrior Synchros, all the Genix Controller Synchros, all the Plague Spreader Synchros, Barone before Barone. Even if all those aren't given Assault Modes, it establishes an engine that at least makes these types of Synchros far more summonable. A card like Sentinel, but it can change its name and it's actually good. Probably wouldn't change the playability of the Synchros, but any associated Assault Modes could very well do the trick. I think the core engine should start to revolve around generic Assault Modes. Monsters that can be summoned off of any Synchro that is either a specific type or maybe attribute, depending on how you want to shake it out. Though I think type would be infinitely more concise and effective. It can serve as a way to better set up a lot of existing Assault Modes, as well as provide support for it to function in a modern setting. I think the best design principle to apply would be to have them all with the ability to shuffle themselves or another Assault Mode in your hand back into the deck and search an Assault Mode related card. One of the biggest nuisances with the mechanic's design is that if you draw the Assault Mode, you're screwed, and the only card that puts them in the deck isn't searchable, and the card that lets you summon them from hand is just about unsearchable. Setting up a strong lineup of cards that actually make drawing or opening them fine is probably the foremost important aspect to hone in on for a modern take on the mechanic. I've thought of a card that revolves around revealing a Synchro or its Assault Mode counterpart from hand, with whichever you reveal resulting in a different effect. Reveal the Assault Mode, shuffle it back to the deck, then summon the Synchro, treating it as being properly summoned so we don't have problems later. Reveal a Synchro and special a monster of the same type from the deck that mentions the Assault Mode. This could obviously get Psy Reflector, so this is your purpose. But it can also get any Assault Mode cards associated with the reveal. Say you make an Assault Mode retrain a Majestic Dragon, reveal Stardust, and summon it. This is the sort of design I'd like to see implemented to bridge the gap between Synchro Summon and actually using Activate. But I'm out of creative fumes, so let's move on to a less taxing approach. Well, it worked so well with Rescue Ace, why don't we just make a way to set a bunch of spell and traps from deck? Although, it'd probably be better to copy Runic's blueprint. The biggest issue that doesn't come up because you're not even summoning one Assault Mode is that it's near impossible you make more than one Assault Mode a turn, which obviously isn't going to fly in a modern setting under the context this mechanic actually does something. If you gave them a Runic Fountain that let you cycle all the cards back and activate them on a dime, the mechanic would obviously have far more application. Speaking of copy-paste, the same idea I had for Gemini's. Having an on and off gameplay cycle, making it so you decide at certain points if you want to pop the Assault Mode to get back to Synchro for its effect, then have ways to be able to easily facilitate making the Assault Mode again. Just finding ways where the transition to Assault Mode is an interaction and not just an endboard piece. Honestly, Assault Mode making a comeback would be much appreciated. Synchro decks right now are in a less than appealing state. You either have decks like Synchron that will spin their wheels for 10 minutes, comboing into infinity, just to summon a bunch of assholes that functionally win the game turn 1. Or they're decks that are barely capable of Synchro summoning in the first place. The design creep of Lynx has forced Synchros into this ride or die playstyle, and I wish Konami would just stop with that mentality. Excel Synchro and Assault Mode can all be actual forms of interaction for the mechanic, dodging effects, or even gaining more relevant effects to the current game state. It just takes some tuning, and we'll be soaring past the finish line in no time.